The doorbell rang at 9:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, which should have been my first warning. Nobody rings doorbells anymore, not friends, not delivery drivers, not even Jehovah's Witnesses. They text first, or they leave packages by the door, or they just don't come at all. But there it was. That old-fashioned two-note chime I'd barely heard since moving into this apartment 3 years ago. I paused Netflix mid-episode and padded to the front door in my socks, wine glass still in hand. The peephole revealed a distorted figure on my doorstep, tall, broad-shouldered, hunched slightly under the yellow porch light. Something about the silhouette made my chest tighten, though I couldn't say why. When I opened the door, my wine glass nearly slipped from my fingers. "Hey, Marcus." It was him. It was actually him. He looked the same and nothing like I remembered. The same golden hair, though it was messier now, longer, falling across his forehead in a way that suggested he'd been running his hands through it. The same blue eyes that had haunted my teenage dreams, though they were shadowed now, circled with the kind of exhaustion that sleep can't fix. The same full mouth that had spoken to everyone but me in high school hallways, though it was pressed into a tight, uncertain line. But he was softer somehow. The sharp edges of 18 had been worn smooth by 10 years of life I knew nothing about. His face was fuller, his shoulders less aggressively broad under a faded flannel shirt that had seen better days. He looked human, breakable, real in a way that my 17-year-old imagination had never been able to capture. "Danny," I managed, and was surprised by how steady my voice sounded. How did you... "I know this is weird," he said, quickly shifting his weight from foot to foot. "I got your address from Sarah Chen." "You remember Sarah?" "She said you two keep in touch on Facebook, and I thought maybe..." He stopped, rubbed the back of his neck. "Look, I wouldn't be here if I wasn't pretty desperate." I stared at him, my brain struggling to process the impossibility of Danny Morrison standing on my doorstep in Portland, Oregon, 1,000 miles from the small Michigan town where we graduated together a decade ago. Danny Morrison, who had been homecoming king and starting quarterback and the center of every social circle I'd ever observed from the periphery. Danny Morrison, who had never spoken directly to me except to ask if he could borrow a pencil in AP history, and who had probably forgotten my name the moment we walked across that graduation stage. Danny Morrison, who I had been desperately, hopelessly, secretly in love with for 4 years running. "Come in," I heard myself say. He hesitated. "Are you sure? I mean, I know this is completely out of left field, Danny." "Come in." I stepped back and watched him cross my threshold, dragging a duffel bag and a sense of displaced desperation with him. He glanced around my living room, taking in the IKEA furniture, the carefully arranged books, the single wine glass and Netflix queue that painted a clear picture of my Tuesday night routine. And I felt suddenly acutely aware of how small my life must seem. "Nice place," he said, and it sounded genuine rather than polite. "Thanks, it's not much, but it's..." I caught myself before saying home. Something about his presence here made that word feel too intimate, too revealing. "Can I get you something to drink? Coffee, beer? I think I have..." "Whatever you're having is fine." I looked down at my wine glass. "Shiraz. Probably not your thing." "Actually, it sounds perfect." While I poured him a glass in the kitchen, I tried to process what was happening. Danny Morrison was in my apartment. Danny Morrison was asking for help. Danny Morrison looked like he hadn't slept properly in weeks, and there was something brittle in his eyes that made my chest ache in a way I recognized and resented. When I returned to the living room, he was standing by my bookshelf, running his finger along the spines. "You always were the smart one," he said without looking at me. Was I? The question came out sharper than I intended. "I don't remember you noticing." He turned then, and for a moment something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. "Fair enough," he said quietly. He took the wineglass from me, our fingers brushing briefly. His were cold. I probably deserved that. We stood there in my living room, 10 years and 1,000 unspoken words stretching between us. On the TV, my Netflix show waited on pause, the screen dim. Outside, Portland traffic hummed its constant urban lullaby. Inside, the silence felt so heavy I thought it might crack my floorboards. "So," I said finally, "what brings Danny Morrison to my doorstep on a random Tuesday night?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "God, where do I start?" He took a large sip of wine, grimaced slightly, then took another. "The short version? My life completely fell apart about 3 months ago. Lost my job, lost my apartment, lost my..." He stopped, shook his head. "Long story. The point is, I've been crashing with friends, but I've kind of burned through my options. Sarah mentioned you lived in Portland, and I've got a job interview here Thursday, so I thought maybe..." He trailed off, looking down at his wine. "I know we weren't exactly close in high school. I know this is asking a lot, but I was hoping maybe I could crash on your couch for a few days, just until I figure out my next move." I should have asked more questions. I should have wanted to know about the job he'd lost, the apartment, the thing he'd stopped himself from mentioning. I should have been more cautious about letting someone from my past, someone who represented so much complicated history, into my carefully ordered present. Instead, I heard myself saying, "Of course, stay as long as you need." The relief on his face was immediate and devastating. "Marcus, I can't tell you how much..." "It's fine," I said quickly. "Really, let me get you some pillows and blankets." As I busied myself in the linen closet, I caught glimpses of him settling into my space, testing the couch's firmness, plugging his phone charger into the wall outlet, carefully placing his duffel bag in the corner so it wouldn't be in the way. Such small gestures, but they felt monumental. Danny Morrison was making himself at home in my apartment. Danny Morrison was going to be sleeping 20 feet away from my bedroom. Danny Morrison, who used to walk past me in the halls like I wasn't even there, was now asking to borrow my toothpaste. "The bathroom's down the hall," I said, handing him the bedding. "Towels are in the cabinet under the sink. Make yourself at home." "Thank you," he said, and the sincerity in his voice made my chest tight. "I mean it, Marcus. I know this is weird, but I really appreciate..." "Don't mention it." I picked up my wine glass, needing something to do with my hands. "I'm usually up pretty early for work, but I'll try not to wake you. Help yourself to coffee, whatever's in the fridge." "What do you do for work, I mean?" "Graphic design, mostly freelance, some contract work for a marketing firm downtown." I realized I was oversharing, filling the silence with unnecessary details. "Nothing too exciting." "That's cool. I always wondered what you'd end up doing." The words hung in the air between us. "You wondered about me?" I wanted to ask. "You thought about me at all?" But instead I just nodded and said, "I should probably let you get settled. It's been a long day." It hadn't been a long day, actually. It had been a perfectly ordinary Tuesday, emails and client calls, and a grocery run and Netflix with wine. but suddenly it felt long, heavy with the weight of his unexpected presence and all the feelings I thought I'd buried years ago. Yeah, of course. Thanks again, Marcos. Really. I retreated to my bedroom and closed the door, leaning against it as I listened to him moving around my living room, the soft thud of his duffel bag being opened, the quiet creak of my couch as he tested it again, the distant sound of water running in the bathroom. I sat on my bed and stared at my hands, trying to process what had just happened. After 10 years of silence, Danny Morrison had appeared on my doorstep like some kind of ghost from a past I'd worked very hard to leave behind. And I'd invited him in without hesitation, as if no time had passed at all. As if I were still 17 and willing to do anything for the chance to be near him. This was dangerous territory. I knew that. I'd spent my 20s building a life that was stable, predictable, safe. I dated other men, had relationships that were mature and uncomplicated. I'd convinced myself that my high school infatuation with Danny Morrison was just that. A teenage crush, the kind of thing everyone experiences and eventually outgrows. But lying there in my bed, listening to him settle into my living room, I felt like that awkward 17-year-old again. The one who used to take routes through school that would maximize my chances of seeing him between classes. The one who had memorized his class schedule and knew exactly which lunch table he'd sit at and which friends he'd laugh with. The one who had never, not once, had the courage to actually speak to him. And now he was here, in my space, asking for help. Vulnerable in a way I'd never seen him. Human in a way my teenage imagination had never allowed him to be. I fell asleep that night to the soft sounds of him moving around my apartment. And when I woke up Wednesday morning, I could smell coffee brewing in my kitchen. I found him standing at my kitchen counter in boxers and a t-shirt, hair sticking up at odd angles, squinting at his phone with the particular expression of someone reading bad news. The morning light streaming through my windows caught the gold in his stubble, and for a moment I forgot how to breathe. "Morning," I said, trying to sound casual as I reached around him for a mug. The kitchen was small enough that our shoulders brushed, and I caught a whiff of his smell, soap and sleep and something else that was uniquely him, unchanged from high school. "Morning. I hope it's okay that I made coffee. I couldn't find decaf, so It's fine. I don't drink decaf." I poured myself a cup, added cream. "Sleep okay?" "Yeah, actually, your couch is surprisingly comfortable." He rubbed the back of his neck, a gesture I remembered from high school. "I'm not used to city sounds though, all that traffic." "You'll get used to it. Where are you staying usually? I mean, before this." Something flickered across his face. "Here and there, a friend's place in Grand Rapids for a while. My sister's couch in Detroit. My parents..." He stopped, took a sip of coffee. "Nowhere permanent." I wanted to ask what had happened, what had left him homeless and job hunting at 28. But there was something fragile about him in the morning light, something that made me think pushing too hard might make him disappear entirely. Instead, I said, "What time is your interview tomorrow?" 2 p.m., downtown somewhere, Pioneer Courthouse Square area. He glanced at me hopefully. "You wouldn't happen to know anything about a company called Pacific Creative Solutions?" "Actually, yeah. They're pretty well regarded. Good reputation, decent work culture." I paused. "What's the position?" "Marketing coordinator." "It's not exactly what I was doing before, but..." He shrugged. "Beggars can't be choosers, right?" "What were you doing before?" Another pause, longer this time. "Sales." car dealership back home. He set down his coffee mug with slightly more force than necessary. Turns out I wasn't as good at it as I thought. There was a story there I could tell, something more than just losing a job, but again, something in his expression warned me off. We stood in my kitchen drinking coffee in companionable silence, and I marveled at how strange and natural it felt simultaneously. How many times had I imagined something like this in high school? Danny Morrison in my space, both of us relaxed and comfortable, talking about real things. Of course, in my teenage fantasies, we'd both been shirtless, and the conversation would have led to other things entirely, but this felt more intimate somehow, more real. I should probably get ready for work, I said finally, though I made no move to leave the kitchen. Yeah, of course. Don't let me keep you. He hesitated. Is it okay if I hang out here today? I promise I won't go through your stuff or anything. I've got some job applications to fill out, and Danny, you don't have to ask permission. I told you to make yourself at home. The smile that spread across his face was so grateful, so relieved, that it actually hurt to look at. Thanks, Marcus. I mean it. I showered and dressed for work, hyper aware of his presence in my apartment. When I came out of my bedroom, he was sitting at my kitchen table with his laptop open, papers spread around him. He'd found my spare reading glasses somewhere, probably in the junk drawer where I kept them for emergencies, and they made him look older, more serious, more like the kind of person who would sit at my kitchen table on a Wednesday morning. I'll be back around 6, I said, grabbing my messenger bag. There's not much for lunch, but help yourself to whatever. I'll pick up groceries, he said without looking up from his laptop. It's the least I can do. You don't have to. Marcus. He looked at me then, over the top of my reading glasses, and something in his expression made my stomach flip. Let me do something useful, okay? I need to feel like I'm contributing. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Okay, see you tonight. Work was a disaster. I couldn't concentrate on anything. Every email felt pointless. Every design revision felt trivial. My mind kept wandering back to my apartment, to Danny sitting at my kitchen table, to the way he'd looked in my reading glasses and the grateful smile he'd given me over coffee. Around 3, I found myself Googling him. I told myself it was just curiosity, just filling in the gaps of the last 10 years. But really, I think I needed proof that this was actually happening, that Danny Morrison had really appeared on my doorstep asking for help. His Facebook profile was mostly private, but I could see enough. A few photos from what looked like happier times. Danny at a bar with friends, Danny at what might have been a company picnic, Danny with his arm around a woman whose face was turned away from the camera. His relationship status was listed as single, but that could mean anything. I closed the browser feeling vaguely guilty, like I'd been caught snooping, which I had been technically. When I got home that evening, my apartment smelled like garlic and herbs. I could hear music playing softly, something acoustic and mellow that I didn't recognize. Danny was in my kitchen stirring something on the stove, and when he turned to greet me, his face was flushed from the heat, and he was wearing one of my aprons. I hope you like pasta, he said. I'm not much of a cook, but I figured I could manage spaghetti without poisoning you. You didn't have to. I wanted to. He turned back to the stove. I went to that grocery store on 23rd, Whole Foods, right? Jesus, the prices in this city. But I got stuff for a few days if that's okay. I set down my messenger bag and watched him cook in my kitchen. It was so domestic, so naturally intimate that I felt lightheaded. How did the job applications go? Good, I think. Applied to 3 places, heard back from one already. He glanced at me. Pacific Creative Solutions called. They want to move the interview up to tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. That's great. That's a good sign. Yeah, I hope so. He drained the pasta, steam rising around his face. I really need this to work out, you know? I can't keep bouncing around forever. We ate dinner at my kitchen table, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Danny had always been easy to talk to. I remembered that from the rare occasions we'd been paired for group projects in school. He had a way of asking questions that made you feel interesting, important, like your answers actually mattered to him. So you've been in Portland for 3 years? He asked, twirling pasta around his fork. Yeah. Moved here right after grad school. From Chicago, right? I remember Sarah mentioning that you were going to school there. The fact that he'd remembered, that he'd even asked Sarah about me, sent a warm flutter through my chest. Yeah, UIC, got my MFA in graphic design. That's really cool. I always wondered what happened to you after graduation. There it was again. That casual reference to thinking about me, wondering about me. I took a sip of wine to steady myself. What about you? You stayed in Michigan? Yeah, for a while. Went to state for a couple years, but he shrugged. College wasn't really for me. Started working at Johnson Motors right after I dropped out. My dad knew the owner. Johnson Motors? That's the Ford dealership on State Street? Yep, worked there for almost 8 years. Something dark crossed his face. Right up until I didn't. I waited, but he didn't elaborate. Instead, he asked about my work, my clients, what I liked about Portland. Safe topics, surface level. But underneath the pleasant dinner conversation, I could feel something else, a current of awareness, of possibility that made every casual touch feel electric. After dinner, we moved to the living room. Danny insisted on doing the dishes while I queued up Netflix, and I tried not to stare at the way his shoulders moved under his t-shirt as he worked at my sink. What are you in the mood for? I called from the couch. Whatever you want, I'm not picky. I scrolled through the options, hyper aware that we were about to spend the evening on my couch together, watching TV like a couple. Like people who did this regularly. I settled on a documentary about street art, something neutral, unlikely to contain awkward sex scenes or romantic subplots that might make this weird. Danny joined me on the couch, settling into the other end with his feet tucked under him. There was maybe 2 feet of space between us, but it felt both too much and not nearly enough. I was acutely aware of every movement he made. The way he shifted to get comfortable, the sound of his breathing, the occasional comment about the documentary. About halfway through, during a segment about Banksy, he said, "This is kind of what you do, right? Art stuff? Graphic design is a little different, but yeah, some overlap." I always thought you'd do something creative. You had that whole artist vibe in high school. I looked at him, surprised. I had a vibe? He smiled, and it was soft and a little sheepish. You know, quiet, thoughtful, always sketching in the margins of your notebooks. I used to see you in the art wing sometimes, working on projects during lunch. The fact that he'd noticed me at all was staggering. I'd spent so much time watching him, cataloging his movements and expressions, and apparently he'd been aware of me too, at least peripherally. I didn't think anyone noticed me back then, I said. Something shifted in his expression. Of course people noticed you, Marcus. You just kept to yourself a lot. I was shy, I admitted. Probably too shy for my own good. Yeah, well, High school's weird for everyone. Was it weird for you? I wanted to ask because it had seemed, from my perspective, like high school had been perfect for Danny Morrison. Like he glided through those 4 years surrounded by friends and admiration and opportunity, and like the world had been laid out at his feet, waiting for him to step into it. But looking at him now, sitting on my couch in borrowed clothes, job hunting after losing everything, I realized how little I'd actually known about his inner life back then, how much I'd projected onto him based on nothing more than observation and wishful thinking. The documentary ended and Netflix suggested another one. We let it play, settling deeper into the couch. At some point, Danny stretched his legs out along the cushions and his sock-covered foot ended up near my thigh. Such a small point of contact, but it made my skin feel electric. "This is nice," he said quietly, eyes still on the screen. "What is?" "This, just hanging out, watching TV with someone." He glanced at me. "I haven't done normal stuff like this in a while." "What kind of stuff have you been doing?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Trying not to think too much, mostly." There was pain in his voice, raw and unguarded, and I felt the urge to reach for him, to offer comfort in whatever way I could, but I didn't know how. We were still essentially strangers despite our shared history, despite the fact that he was sleeping on my couch and cooking dinner in my kitchen. "Do you want to talk about it?" I asked. "Not really." He rubbed his eyes. "Not yet anyway, is that okay?" "Of course." We finished the second documentary in comfortable silence. Around 11, Danny started yawning, and I realized I should probably give him space to get ready for bed. And I needed to get some distance before I did something stupid, like reach for him or ask questions I wasn't ready to hear the answers to. "I should probably get some sleep," I said. "Early meeting tomorrow." "Yeah, me too, big day." He stretched, arms over his head, and his shirt rolled up slightly, revealing a strip of pale skin above his waistband. I looked away quickly. "Good luck with the interview," I said, standing up from the couch. "You'll do great." "Thanks for everything, Marcus. I know this is—" "Stop thanking me," I said, maybe a little too sharply. "You're welcome here, okay? For as long as you need." He looked up at me from the couch, something unreadable in his expression. "Okay," he said softly. I retreated to my bedroom and lay awake for a long time, listening to him move around the living room, settle into the couch, turn off the TV. The apartment fell quiet except for the distant hum of traffic and the occasional creak of the building settling. This was dangerous, I thought. This whole situation was dangerous in ways I was only beginning to understand. Not because Danny posed any threat to my safety or my stuff, but because he posed a very real threat to the careful equilibrium I'd built over the past 10 years. I'd worked hard to get over my infatuation with him. I dated other people, built a life that didn't revolve around unrequited longing. I'd become someone who was confident, independent, whole on his own, but lying there in the dark, knowing he was just 20 feet away, I felt all those old feelings stirring to life, the butterflies, the hypersensitivity to his every movement and expression, the desperate desire to be close to him that had defined so much of my teenage years. I was in trouble, deep, complicated trouble, and the worst part was, I didn't want him to leave. Thursday morning, I woke up to the sound of my shower running. I lay in bed listening to the water and trying not to think about Danny naked in my bathroom, using my shampoo, standing under my shower head. When I finally emerged from my bedroom, he was sitting at my kitchen table in a button-down shirt and dress pants, hair still damp, frowning at his reflection in his phone screen as he attempted to knot a tie. "Need help with that?" I asked. He looked up, relieved. "I haven't worn a tie in 2 years. I'm completely out of practice." I walked over and stood in front of him, reaching for the tie. He tilted his chin up slightly, giving me access to his collar, and suddenly we were closer than we'd been since he'd arrived. Close enough that I could smell my soap on his skin, see the faint freckles across the bridge of his nose that I'd forgotten about. "There," I said, settling the knot against his throat. My fingers brushed the warm skin of his neck, and I felt him swallow. "Thanks," he said quietly. We stood there for a moment, not moving apart. His eyes were very blue and very serious, and looking directly into mine in a way that made my heart stutter. Then my coffee maker beeped, breaking the spell, and we both stepped back. "Coffee?" I asked, though my voice came out slightly rough. "Please, I'm nervous as hell." I poured him a travel mug, added cream the way I'd noticed he liked it. "You'll be fine, just be yourself." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Yeah, that's gotten me so far in life." "Danny, sorry, I'm being negative." He took a sip of coffee, checked his phone. "I should probably head out soon, don't want to be late." "Do you need directions? The Max can get you downtown pretty easily." I figured I'd just take an Uber, faster, and I don't want to risk getting lost. I watched him gather his things, wallet, keys, the folder of documents he'd printed out the day before. He looked good in the dress shirt and tie, professional, put together, but I could see the anxiety in the set of his shoulders, the way he kept checking and rechecking that he had everything. "Hey," I said as he headed for the door. He turned back. "You've got this, okay? They called you. They want to meet you. That's already a good sign." Some of the tension left his face. "Thanks, Marcus. I'll see you tonight." "I'll be here." After he left, I tried to focus on work, but I found myself checking my phone constantly, wondering how the interview was going. Around noon, I got a text. "Think it went well. They want me to come back Monday for a second interview." I felt a surge of relief and something else, pride maybe, or just happiness that things might be working out for him. "That's amazing," I texted back. "Dinner to celebrate? Only if you let me cook again. Deal." When I got home that evening, Danny was in the kitchen again, this time attempting something more ambitious than pasta. The apartment smelled like herbs and garlic and something that might have been chicken. "How did it go?" I asked, dropping my bag by the door. "Really well, I think. The team seems great, and the work is exactly what I've been looking for." He turned from the stove, grinning. "It's not a done deal yet, but I'm cautiously optimistic." "That's fantastic. What's the second interview for?" "Meeting with the director, going over some project samples, standard stuff." He paused. "If I get it, I'd need to start Monday." Which means you'd need to find a place to live." "Yeah." Something flickered across his face. "I've been looking at apartments online. There are some decent options that aren't completely out of my price range." I felt an odd stab of disappointment, which was ridiculous. This was what was supposed to happen. Danny would get the job, find an apartment, move out of my living room and back into his own life. That was the plan. So why did the thought of him leaving make my chest feel tight? "Well, you don't have to rush out or anything," I heard myself saying. "You can stay here as long as you need to get settled." "Are you sure? I don't want to overstay my welcome." "Danny, you've been here 2 days. You haven't even come close to overstaying anything." He smiled, and it was soft and grateful in a way that made me want to reach for him. "Thanks, Marcus." I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't let me stay. You would have figured something out. You always do. Do I? He looked genuinely curious. What makes you say that? I don't know. Just, you were always that guy in high school, the one who had everything figured out, who could handle anything. Danny was quiet for a moment, stirring whatever was in the pan. Is that really how you saw me back then? How could I not? You were Danny Morrison. You had everything. He turned to look at me, and there was something almost sad in his expression. I really didn't, have everything figured out. I mean, I was just good at pretending. Before I could ask what he meant, he was turning back to the stove, and the moment passed. We ate dinner and talked about his interview, about the company, about Portland neighborhoods where he might want to look for apartments. Safe topics. But underneath the conversation, I felt that current again. That awareness of him as more than just an old classmate crashing on my couch. After dinner, we ended up on the couch again, this time with a bottle of wine between us. The documentary had given way to some mindless comedy special, but neither of us was really watching. We were talking instead about college, about work, about the weird paths life takes you down. I always thought you'd end up in New York or something, Danny said, refilling our glasses. Big city, working for some famous design firm. I thought about it, but Portland felt more manageable, I guess, less overwhelming. Makes sense. You always seemed like you'd want somewhere with character, but not too much chaos. I looked at him, surprised again by how much he'd apparently observed about me. You really did notice me in high school. Of course I noticed you. He took a sip of wine. You were hard to miss. I was invisible. You were quiet. That's different. Is it? Yeah, invisible people don't get remembered 10 years later. The wine was making me bold, loosening the careful controls I'd been maintaining since he'd arrived. Why do you remember me, Danny? Really? He was quiet for so long I thought he wasn't going to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft, almost hesitant. You want to know something weird? I used to be kind of jealous of you. Jealous of me? I laughed, but it came out hollow. Right. I'm serious. He shifted on the couch, turning to face me more fully. You seemed so self-contained, like you knew exactly who you were, what you wanted. You didn't need anyone's approval. Danny, I spent 4 years desperately wanting to be noticed. By who? The question hung in the air between us. By you, I thought. By you, always by you. But I couldn't say that. Not yet, maybe not ever. Everyone, I said instead. Anyone. Well, you were noticed. Maybe not by the people you thought you wanted attention from, but... He trailed off, took another sip of wine. But what? Nothing. It's not important. I wanted to push, wanted to know what he'd been about to say, but something in his expression warned me off. We were dancing around something here, something fragile and potentially explosive, and I wasn't sure either of us was ready for it. The comedy special ended and another one started. We kept talking, the conversation meandering through safer territory, movies we'd liked, places we wanted to travel, random memories from high school that didn't involve too much emotional weight. Around midnight, I excused myself to get ready for bed. When I came back from brushing my teeth, Danny was looking through the books on my coffee table. He'd picked up one of my old photo albums, the kind with actual printed pictures that people used to keep before everything went digital. Is it okay if I look through this? He asked. Sure. I sat back down on the couch, suddenly nervous. That album covered my college years mostly, but there were some high school photos mixed in. Pictures from graduation, from parties I'd been invited to, group photos from classes. Danny flipped through the pages slowly, pausing occasionally to study a picture or ask a question. When he got to a page of graduation photos, he stopped entirely. Jesus, look how young we all look, he said. There was a group photo from our AP history class, 20-something 18-year-olds arranged in 3 rows, all dressed up for the formal class picture. I was in the back row, off to one side, smiling politely at the camera. Danny was front and center, of course, grinning that easy, confident smile that had made half the school fall in love with him. "You were in this class?" he asked, looking up at me. "Yeah, I sat 2 rows behind you." He studied the photo again, then looked at me. "2 rows behind me." "Yep, right behind Jennifer Walsh and Katie Morrison." "Katie Morrison, no relation, despite the name." He was quiet for a moment. "I can't believe I didn't realize you were right there." "Why would you? You had plenty of other things to pay attention to." "Like what?" "Like Jennifer Walsh, for one." "You two dated senior year, right?" Something shifted in his expression. "For a few months." It wasn't serious. I remembered it being serious. I remembered watching them together in the hallways, holding hands, going to prom together. I remembered the sick jealousy that had twisted in my stomach every time I saw them kiss by her locker. But I didn't say any of that. Danny closed the photo album and set it aside. "I should probably get some sleep. Don't want to be tired for round 2 on Monday." "Yeah, of course." We both stood up from the couch, the wine making us both slightly unsteady. The living room felt smaller somehow, the space between us charged with something I couldn't name. Danny gathered the empty wine glasses, his movements careful and deliberate. "Marcus," he said, pausing at the kitchen doorway. "Yeah?" He turned back to look at me, and in the dim light from the lamp, his face was soft and uncertain. "Back then, did you ever think about me, even once?" The question hit me like a physical blow. I stood there frozen, my heart hammering against my ribs, while the silence stretched between us like a live wire. 10 years of carefully buried feelings rose to the surface all at once. The longing, the wanting, the desperate teenage ache of being invisible to the one person you needed to see you. "Danny," I started, then stopped, because what could I say? That I thought about him every day for 4 years, that I planned my routes through school around the possibility of glimpsing him in the hallways, that I'd gone to sleep most nights imagining what it would be like if he ever looked at me the way he looked at Jennifer Walsh. I tried again, but the words wouldn't come. He nodded slowly as if my silence was answer enough. "Right. Sorry, I shouldn't have. Every day," I whispered. He went very still. "I thought about you every day," I said louder now. "Every single day for 4 years." The wine glasses slipped from his hands, hitting the floor with a soft thud but not breaking. Neither of us moved to pick them up. "Marcus, you asked," I said, and my voice sounded strange to my own ears, raw. "You asked if I ever thought about you. The answer is yes. Every day. Every fucking day." The words hung between us, finally spoken after a decade of silence. I felt exposed, vulnerable, like I'd just stripped naked in front of him, but also strangely relieved. Danny took a step toward me, then stopped. "I didn't know," he said quietly. "Of course you didn't know. How could you? I never said anything. I was too scared to. I didn't know it was mutual." The world tilted sideways. "What?" But Danny was already retreating, running his hands through his hair in that familiar gesture of distress. Fuck. I shouldn't have said that. I'm drunk and you're being kind to me and I'm reading things into... Danny, stop. He looked at me. What did you mean, mutual? For a long moment, the only sound was the hum of my refrigerator and the distant noise of late-night Portland traffic. Then Danny sank down onto my couch, his head in his hands. I should probably leave, he said to the floor. Don't. The word came out sharper than I intended. Don't run away from this, please. He looked up at me and there was something broken in his expression. I can't do this, Marcus. I can't mess up the one good thing that's happened to me in months. You're not messing anything up. Aren't I? He laughed, but it was hollow. I show up at your door desperate and homeless. You take me in out of the goodness of your heart, and now you're what? I'm telling you things I should have said 10 years ago. I sat down on the couch beside him, leaving space between us, but close enough that I could see the exhaustion in his face, the way his hands were shaking slightly. What things? I asked softly. He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. That I used to watch you sometimes, in class, in the hallways. That I wondered what you were thinking about when you got that faraway look during lectures. That I wanted to talk to you, but I never knew how. My chest felt tight. Danny, that Jennifer Walsh was nice and pretty and exactly what everyone expected me to want. But when I was with her, I kept thinking about how different it might feel to be with someone who actually saw me, someone quiet and thoughtful who noticed things other people missed. The living room felt too small, too warm. I couldn't breathe properly. You never said anything, I managed. How could I? I was 18, scared as hell, and everyone expected me to be this perfect golden boy who had it all figured out. I couldn't even admit to myself what I was feeling, let alone tell you. I stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. You had feelings for me? Marcus. He turned to look at me directly and his eyes were bright with unshed tears. I had feelings for you for 4 fucking years. And then graduation happened and everyone scattered and I convinced myself it was just some weird phase, that I'd imagined it all. But you didn't. No, I didn't. We sat there in silence, the weight of a decade's worth of missed chances settling between us. Outside it started to rain, a soft Portland drizzle that tapped against the windows like fingers drumming. What do we do now? I asked. I don't know. Danny rubbed his face. I honestly don't know. This is all so fucked up. Why is it fucked up? Because I'm a mess, Marcus. My life is falling apart. I lost my job, my apartment, He stopped himself again, but this time I wasn't going to let it slide. Your what? He was quiet for a moment, then... My relationship. I was with someone for 3 years, living together, talking about marriage. And then he found out I was lying to him about something important, and everything fell apart. The pronoun hit me like a punch to the gut. He? Yeah, Trevor. We met at work. Danny's voice was flat, emotionless. He was good for me, stable, successful, everything I thought I wanted. But I could never quite be honest with him about who I used to be, about what I used to want. What does that mean? Danny looked at me, and there was something raw and desperate in his expression. It means I spent 3 years trying to pretend that my first love wasn't some quiet, brilliant boy from high school who never knew I existed. The world stopped spinning. Danny. So yeah, it's fucked up. because I'm sitting in your living room, drunk on your wine, finally telling you things I should have said when we were 18. And you're being kind to me because that's who you are, but I'm selfishly hoping. He stopped, shook his head. Never mind. Hoping what? That maybe it's not too late. The words hung in the air between us, fragile and terrifying and full of possibility. I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, looking down into something that could either destroy me or save me. It's not too late, I heard myself say. Danny looked at me with something like hope flickering in his eyes. Marcus, I mean it, it's not too late. And then, because I'd already jumped off the cliff anyway, I reached for him. Part 2. I woke up the next morning with Danny Morrison's face 2 inches from mine. We were both still on the couch, fully clothed, tangled together under the throw blanket I kept draped over the back. His arm was around my waist, his breath warm against my neck, and for a moment I let myself believe this was normal, that I woke up this way every day. Then reality crashed back in. The wine, the conversation, the moment when I'd reached for him and he'd reached back. We'd held each other and talked until nearly 3 a.m., 10 years of unspoken words, finally spilling out between us. Nothing had happened beyond that. We'd been too exhausted, too overwhelmed by the magnitude of what we'd revealed to each other. But we'd held each other, and that felt like everything. Danny stirred against me, his eyes fluttering open. For a moment he looked confused, disoriented. Then his gaze focused on my face, and I watched awareness dawn in his expression. Morning, he said softly. Morning. We stayed like that for a few minutes, neither of us moving to untangle ourselves. The morning light streaming through my windows was soft and golden, and I could hear birds singing in the tree outside. It felt surreal, like something from a dream I'd had 1,000 times but never expected to experience. I should probably get up, Danny said eventually, though he made no move to do so. Probably. Make some coffee. Figure out what I'm doing today. Probably. He smiled then, soft and sleepy, and so beautiful it made my chest ache. Are we going to talk about last night? Do you want to? I wasn't ready to answer last night, he said, when you asked what we do now. I wasn't ready to ask until now. Danny shifted slightly, propping himself up on one elbow so he could look at me properly. His hair was sticking up at odd angles, and there were pillow creases on his cheek. He looked young and vulnerable and completely perfect. I think, he said carefully, that maybe we should take this slow. Okay. I mean it, Marcus. I'm still figuring out my shit, the job, where I'm going to live, what I want my life to look like. And you've got your life together. I don't want to mess that up. You're not messing anything up, yet. I reached up and smoothed down his hair, letting my fingers linger against his temple. Danny, you've been here 3 days and my life already feels more right than it has in years. You're not messing anything up. Something flickered across his face, relief maybe, or gratitude. Is that true? Yeah, it is. He leaned into my touch, closing his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, there was something determined in his expression. Okay, he said, slow, but nothing. Not nothing. We smiled at each other, and for a moment everything felt simple and easy and right. Then my alarm went off from the bedroom, cutting through the peaceful morning haze. Shit, I said, untangling myself from him reluctantly. Work. Go, Danny said, sitting up and stretching. I'll make coffee, maybe figure out some apartment viewings for this weekend. The reminder That he was still planning to move out sent an unexpected pang through my chest. But we'd said slow, and slow probably meant not asking him to abandon his housing search after one conversation. I showered and dressed for work, hyper aware of his presence in my apartment. When I emerged from my bedroom, he was sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop, a cup of coffee steaming beside him. He'd made me a travel mug prepared exactly the way I liked it. "Thank you," I said, accepting the coffee. "No problem." I lingered by the table, not quite ready to leave. "Will you be here when I get home?" "Where else would I be?" "I don't know. Sometimes I think I might be dreaming all of this." Danny reached out and caught my wrist gently. "You're not dreaming." The simple contact sent warmth shooting up my arm. "Okay. Marcus?" "Yeah? Tonight when you get home, maybe we could talk some more about high school, about what happens next, all of it." "I'd like that." "Good." He squeezed my wrist gently before letting go. "Now go. Don't be late because of me." Work was even more impossible than it had been the day before. I kept checking my phone, expecting texts from Danny, but none came. I wondered what he was doing, if he was really looking at apartments or just sitting in my living room thinking about the same things I was thinking about. Around lunch, I finally broke down and sent him a message. "How's the apartment hunting going?" His response came back almost immediately, depressing. "Everything decent is either too expensive or too far from downtown." "Don't stress about it, you've got time." Do I though? The question sat in my phone like a small bomb. What did he mean? Time for what? Finding an apartment, or time for us to figure out whatever this was between us? I didn't know how to respond, so I didn't, but I thought about it for the rest of the afternoon. When I got home that evening, Danny was in the kitchen again, but this time he wasn't cooking. He was doing dishes, my dishes, the ones that had been sitting in the sink for days because I'd been too lazy to deal with them. "You don't have to do that," I said, dropping my bag by the door. "I wanted to. Gives me something to do with my hands while I think." "What are you thinking about?" He glanced at me over his shoulder. "Everything." I poured myself a glass of water and leaned against the counter watching him work. There was something so domestic about the scene. Danny at my sink, sleeves rolled up, handling my plates and mugs with the kind of care that suggested he belonged here. "Find any promising apartments?" I asked. "A few possibilities. There's one in Hawthorne that might work, and another one in Selwood that's not too bad." He paused in his scrubbing. "They're both available immediately." "That's good." "Is it?" The question was quiet, almost hesitant. I looked at him more carefully, noting the tension in his shoulders, the way he wasn't quite meeting my eyes. "Danny, what's going on?" He set down the plate he was washing and turned to face me. "I keep thinking about what you said last night, about your life feeling more right since I've been here." "Yeah? The thing is, mine does too, and that scares the hell out of me." I set down my water glass. "Why does it scare you?" "Because I've spent the last 3 months learning not to trust good things. Learning that when something feels too perfect, it usually means it's about to fall apart." "I'm not going to fall apart on you." "How can you know that?" The vulnerability in his voice made my chest tight. "I can't know it for certain, but Danny, I've been carrying feelings for you for 10 years. 10 years. Do you really think I'm going to run away now?" He was quiet for a moment, considering this. "What if you get tired of me? What if I'm too much work, too complicated? What if you decide you don't actually want this?" I countered. What if you wake up tomorrow and realize that what you're feeling is just nostalgia or gratitude or some kind of rebound thing from your last relationship? It's not. How can you know that? We stared at each other across my small kitchen, both of us suspended in the uncertainty of new and fragile things. Outside it was starting to get dark, the early autumn evening settling over the city. I guess we can't know, Danny said finally. Either of us. I guess not. So what do we do? I thought about it, watching his face in the kitchen light. He looked tired and hopeful and scared all at once. So human, so far from the untouchable golden boy I'd worshipped in high school. We try, I said. We take it slow, like you said. We figure it out as we go. Even if it's messy, especially if it's messy. A smile started to tug at the corners of his mouth. You sure about that? I'm pretty good at messy. I'm counting on it. He laughed then, and the tension in the kitchen shifted, became something warmer and more manageable. Okay, we try. But I'm still going to look at apartments this weekend, just in case. Just in case. We ordered takeout for dinner and ate it on the couch, talking about safer things. His second interview on Monday, my current projects at work, the weird weather Portland had been having. But underneath the casual conversation, I could feel something new building between us. Not the desperate longing of our teenage years, but something steadier, more real. After dinner, we ended up looking through more photo albums. Danny had brought his own laptop out and we spent an hour going through his Facebook photos, filling in the gaps of each other's lives over the past 10 years. This was at Trevor's sister's wedding, he said, clicking through photos from what looked like an elegant outdoor ceremony. 6 months ago, back when I thought I had my shit together. There were pictures of Danny in a navy suit smiling beside a tall man with dark hair and kind eyes. They looked happy together, comfortable in a way that made my stomach twist with something that might have been jealousy. He seems nice, I said, and meant it. He is nice. That was part of the problem. How is that a problem? Danny closed the laptop and leaned back against the couch. Because nice wasn't enough. I kept waiting to feel about him the way I felt about... He stopped, looked at me. The way I felt about you. Did you tell him that? Not in so many words, but he figured it out eventually. He's not stupid. Danny ran his hands through his hair. The night everything fell apart, he asked me point blank if I was in love with someone else, and I couldn't lie to him anymore. What did you say? I said yes. And then I said it was someone from high school that I'd never even kissed. Someone who probably didn't even remember my name. My chest felt tight. Danny. He laughed at first. Thought I was making some kind of joke. But when he realized I was serious, Danny shook his head. He told me I needed to figure out what I actually wanted, because he wasn't going to waste any more time being someone's consolation prize. I'm sorry. Don't be. He was right. Danny looked at me. I spent 3 years with a good man who deserved better than someone who was still hung up on his high school crush. Is that what I am? Your high school crush? Danny was quiet for a long moment. You were my first love, he said finally, and maybe my only one. The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt tears prick at my eyes. 10 years of longing and regret and impossible hope all tangled together in my throat. Don't say that if you don't mean it, I whispered. I mean it. His voice was steady, certain. I mean every word. We sat in silence for a while, the weight of everything we'd shared settling between us. Outside, the city hummed its constant background song, but inside my living room, the world felt very small and very quiet. Can I ask you something? Danny said eventually. Of course. What was it like for you? After graduation, I mean, did you try to get over me? I thought about how to answer that honestly. I dated other people, had relationships. Some of them were good, really good, but there was always this thing in the back of my mind, this what if, that I could never quite shake. What if what? What if I'd been braver? What if I'd said something to you back then? What if you'd felt the same way and we could have figured it out together instead of spending 10 years wondering? Danny nodded slowly. I used to think about that too, especially after I came out to myself, really came out. I'd wonder if things would have been different if I'd been honest earlier. When did you come out? To myself. College, sophomore year. To other people. Gradually. My parents still don't know, actually. I wasn't surprised. Danny's parents were nice people, but conservative in that small town Michigan way that made certain conversations difficult. That must have been hard, I said. It was, is. He shifted on the couch, turning to face me more fully. What about you? Was it easier being in Chicago? In some ways, harder in others. Big city means more anonymity, but it also means more pressure to have everything figured out. And I didn't, not really. Do any of us? I don't think so. We talked until late again, filling in more pieces of each other's stories. Danny told me about college, about dropping out after his sophomore year, about the job at the dealership, and how he'd slowly worked his way up to management before everything fell apart. I told him about art school, about the struggle to make it as a freelance designer, about the relationships that had mattered and the ones that hadn't. It was easier than I'd expected, this catching up, like slipping into a conversation that had been paused, rather than starting from scratch. Maybe that was what happened with people who had unfinished business. The thread was still there, waiting to be picked up. Around midnight, we finally admitted we should probably get some sleep, but neither of us moved from the couch. Marcus, Danny said softly. Yeah? Last night when we fell asleep out here, was that okay? I mean, I don't want to assume it was more than okay, because I've been thinking about it all day, how right it felt. Me too. So maybe we could do that again? Instead of answering, I reached for the throw blanket and spread it over both of us. Danny smiled and settled back against the couch cushions, and I curled up beside him, my head on his shoulder, his arm around me. This is nice, he murmured into my hair. Yeah, it is. Marcus? Thank you for all of this. Stop thanking me. I can't help it. You saved me. You know that? I tilted my head to look at him. You saved yourself. I just gave you a couch to sleep on. You gave me a lot more than that. Before I could ask what he meant, his breathing had evened out, and I realized he was asleep. I lay there listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat and feeling more content than I had in years. This was dangerous, I knew, letting myself get used to this, to him. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't care about the potential for heartbreak. Some things were worth the risk. The weekend passed in a blur of quiet domesticity that felt both foreign and completely natural. Saturday morning, Danny insisted on making pancakes from scratch, and we spent an hour in the kitchen together, him at the stove and me making coffee, bumping into each other in the small space in ways that felt increasingly intentional. You're going to make me burn these, he said, as I reached around him for the cream. Sorry. But I didn't move away, and neither did he. For a moment we stood there, my chest pressed lightly against his back, both of us very still. Marcus, he said softly. Yeah? We said slow. I know. This doesn't feel very slow. I stepped back, giving him space. Sorry. Don't be sorry. He turned around, spatula still in hand, just checking that we're on the same page. We are, I think. He smiled. Good, because I'm having a hard time remembering why slow was such a good idea. Because you have a job interview Monday and apartment viewings today and a whole life to figure out. Right. That. He turned back to the stove. Sometimes I wish life came with a pause button, so we could figure this out without all the other stuff getting in the way. Exactly. I understood the feeling. Everything between us felt simultaneously rushed and overdue, like we were trying to make up for 10 years of lost time while also being careful not to move too fast. It was exhausting and exhilarating and completely worth it. After breakfast, Danny left for his apartment viewings, and I spent the day trying not to obsess over when he'd be back. I cleaned the apartment, did laundry, caught up on work emails, normal Saturday things that felt strange and empty without him there. He returned around 4 with takeout containers from a Vietnamese place I'd never tried. How did the viewings go? I asked as we unpacked the food. Fine. The Hawthorne place is nice. Available October 1st. That's soon. Yeah. He handed me a container of pho. 2 weeks. 2 weeks. The timeline felt both impossibly short and interminably long. Short because I wasn't ready for him to leave. Long because I could already feel how much I'd miss having him here. What did you think of the neighborhood? I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. It's good. Close to the Max line, some decent restaurants. There's a coffee shop on the corner that looked promising. Sounds perfect. Danny paused in opening his own container. Does it? I mean, it sounds like it meets your needs. Marcos, look at me. I looked up from my pho. His expression was serious, searching. Do you want me to take that apartment? The question hung between us, loaded with implications I wasn't sure I was ready to face. Because the honest answer was no, I didn't want him to take the apartment. I wanted him to stay here on my couch or in my bed or wherever he'd let me be close to him. But that felt like too much too soon, especially when he was still figuring out his job situation. I want you to do whatever feels right for you, I said carefully. That's not what I asked. Danny, do you want me to take the apartment? I set down my chopsticks and looked at him directly. No, I don't. Some of the tension left his shoulders. Why not? Because I like having you here. I like waking up with you on my couch and making coffee together and coming home to you in my kitchen. I like all of it more than I probably should. More than you should? We've known each other for 10 years, but we've been actually talking for 4 days. By any reasonable standard, I should not be this attached to having you in my space. Danny smiled. When has anything about us been reasonable? Fair point. For what it's worth, I don't want to take the apartment either. My heart jumped. You don't? I mean, I should. It would be the smart thing, the responsible thing. Get my own place, establish some independence, prove that I can take care of myself. But I've never felt as at home anywhere as I do on your couch. We stared at each other across the takeout containers, the weight of the admission settling between us. This was definitely not slow. This was moving at light speed towards something that could either be wonderful or catastrophic. So, what do we do? I asked. I don't know. What feels right to you? I thought about it, trying to separate what I wanted from what made sense. How about this? You get the job on Monday, we see how that goes for a week or two, and then we reassess. No pressure to make any big decisions right now. You'd be okay with me staying here a little longer? Danny, I'd be okay with you staying here as long as you want. The words came out before I could stop them, more honest than I'd intended. But looking at his face, I didn't regret them. Even if I'm a disaster? He asked. Even if I leave dishes in the sink and use up all your hot water and take up too much space on your couch? Even then. Even if I fall completely in love with you and it complicates everything? My breath caught. Even then. Okay, he said softly. Then I'll stay, for now. For now. But even as we said it, I think we both knew that for now was starting to feel a lot like for good. Sunday was quieter. We both seemed to sense that we needed to step back from the intensity of the previous day's conversation to give ourselves some breathing room before Danny's interview on Monday. We read the paper over coffee, took a long walk through the neighborhood, cooked dinner together without talking about the future. But the awareness was still there, crackling between us like electricity. Every casual touch felt significant. Every shared glance carried weight. We were both trying to be careful, but the pull between us was getting harder to ignore. That evening, we were doing laundry together in my building's basement laundry room when it happened. I was transferring clothes from the washer to the dryer, and Danny was folding a load that had just finished. The space was small and warm and filled with the smell of detergent and fabric softener. Hand me that shirt, Danny asked, reaching across me toward the dryer. I turned to grab it at the same time he moved, and suddenly we were pressed together in the narrow space between machines. For a moment, neither of us moved. I could feel the warmth of his body, smell the familiar scent of him, see the small scar on his chin that I'd forgotten about until now. Sorry, he said, but he didn't step back. It's okay. We stood there for a heartbeat longer than necessary, the air between us thick with possibility. Then Danny's hand came up to touch my face, his thumb brushing across my cheekbone. Marcus, he said, and there was something almost desperate in his voice. I know. This is supposed to be slow. I know. But neither of us moved away. If anything, the space between us seemed to shrink until I could count his eyelashes and see the small flecks of green in his blue eyes. Maybe slow is overrated, I whispered. He smiled, soft and uncertain. Maybe. And then, because one of us had to do something or we were going to spontaneously combust in my building's laundry room, I leaned forward and kissed him. It was soft, tentative, nothing like the desperate kisses I'd imagined in high school. His lips were warm and slightly chapped, and he tasted like the coffee we'd shared after dinner. For a moment he went very still, and I thought I'd misread the situation entirely. Then he kissed me back. It was like coming home and jumping off a cliff at the same time. 10 years of wandering dissolved into the simple reality of his mouth against mine, his hand still cupping my face, the soft sound he made when I deepened the kiss slightly. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard. Okay, Danny said, his forehead resting against mine. Maybe definitely not slow. Maybe not. I should probably mention that I've been wanting to do that since Tuesday night. Only since Tuesday night? He laughed. Fine. Since I was 17 years old. Better. We kissed again, longer this time, and I felt something settle into place in my chest. Something that had been wound tight for 10 years, finally relaxing. When we eventually made it back upstairs, we didn't talk about what had happened. But we didn't need to. Everything had shifted, and we both knew it. The careful boundaries we'd been maintaining had blurred beyond recognition. That night we fell asleep on the couch again, but this time when I woke up in the middle of the night, Danny was awake too, watching me in the dim light from the street. "Can't sleep?" I whispered. "Just thinking." "About what?" He was quiet for a moment. "About how different this is from what I imagined." "Different how?" "Better," he said simply. "So much better than anything I imagined." I reached for his hand under the blanket, threading our fingers together. "Even though we're both disasters?" "Especially because we're both disasters." We fell asleep like that, hands clasped, and when I woke up Monday morning, I felt like maybe, finally, everything was going to be okay. Danny's interview was at 9 and he left my apartment at 8:15 in the same shirt and tie combination from the week before. But this time he kissed me goodbye at the door, soft and quick and so natural it felt like we'd been doing it for years instead of hours. "Wish me luck," he said. "You don't need it, but good luck anyway." I watched him walk down the street toward the bus stop, and I felt that same flutter of possibility I'd been carrying since our kiss in the laundry room. This could work, I thought. Despite all the complications and unknowns, this could actually work. He texted me around 10:30. Interview went great. They offered me the job. I stared at my phone, reading the message 3 times before it sank in. Danny had gotten the job. He was staying in Portland. The immediate crisis that had brought him to my doorstep was resolved. "That's incredible," I texted back. "Congratulations." "Thanks, I start Wednesday. We should celebrate tonight. Definitely, I'll pick up wine on my way home." "Marcus." "Yeah." "Thank you for everything." I smiled, typing back, "Stop thanking me." "Never." The rest of the day crawled by. I kept checking my phone, expecting more updates, but Danny went quiet. Around 3, I started to worry that something had gone wrong, that the job offer had been rescinded or he changed his mind about staying. But when I got home that evening, he was sitting at my kitchen table with a bottle of champagne and a grin that could have powered the entire city. "Champagne?" I asked, dropping my bag. "They offered me more money than I asked for," he said, standing up to hug me, "and full benefits, and 3 weeks paid vacation. Marcus, this job is perfect." I hugged him back, breathing in the familiar scent of him.